So we are live now.
Okay. Greetings and welcome to Anekdhara's 56th webinar. As you're aware, this is on rethinking school education, learning processes, and modes of measurement. Today we have two eminent persons from the field of education, Dr. Nirja Raghavan and Dr. Kamla Mukunda. We also have with us Mr. Subodh Gupta, ED of Saral Services, who works in the field of education and skilling, rural India. We want to thank him for facilitating this webinar. So without much ado, let me introduce our anchor and moderator, Mr. Karthikeya Mishra. Karthikeya is an educator and social impact professional with hands-on experience in teaching, policy research, and academic content development. He completed the Teach for India Fellowship, which is a prestigious two-year leadership program and which addressed on educational inequity. Together, we had taught English and social studies in an underserved CBSE school. And today, he is continuing his impactful policy work through, he finished his work in Policy in Action Fellowship, and he's also served as a research assistant and continues to be an educator. Karthikeya holds a bachelor's degree in history from University of Delhi and is pursuing a bachelor's in education to strengthen his pedagogical foundation. So we have Karthikeya, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Madhu sir, for the intro. Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this webinar organized by Anekdhara on the theme Rethinking School Education, Learning Process, and Modes of Measurement. It is a pleasure to have all of you with us today. India has made a remarkable progress in expanding access to education. More children are entering schools, staying in school for longer, and completing higher levels of education. Yet, as successive annual status of education reports have highlighted, being in school and actually learning are not the same thing. This brings us to a fundamental question: what does it really mean for a child to learn? It is learning simply the ability to remember and reproduce information in an examination, or does it involve something deeper, the ability to understand concepts, ask questions, think critically, make connections, solve problems, and apply knowledge to unfamiliar situations? Interestingly, this is not a new question. Nearly a century ago, Mahatma Gandhi offered a remarkably broad conception of education when he wrote, "By education, I mean an all round development drawing out of the best in child and man, body, mind, and spirit." If education is about drawing out the best in a child, then perhaps we should ask whether our methods of assessment are capable of seeing the best, or whether they only measure a narrow part of what a child all knows and what he can do. Now, so today, rather than asking only how well did the student perform, we hope to explore more fundamentally what can assessment tell us about how learning is actually taking place, and how can that understanding help us improve the learning process itself. And to begin this conversation, we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Nirja Raghavan. Dr. Nirja has been working at Center for Learning since 1995, a teacher-run school inspired by the
No,
education.
No, you've switched the two bios.
Center for Learning is Kamla ma'am.
Okay. All right. I think it got a bit mixed up. Just.
Should I introduce Karthikeya? Should I introduce?
Yes,
Kamla?
ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah,
I
ma'am.
think I got mixed a little.
We have our first speaker for the day is Dr. Nirja Raghavan. Dr. Nirja Raghavan is the founder director of Thinking Teacher. She has a doctorate degree in chemistry from Princeton University, USA, and her last position was professor at Azim Premji University. She worked with Azim Premji Foundation for almost 8 years, mainly in the field of science teacher education. pedagogy, and curriculum development. She has taught in several mainstream as well as alternative schools in India and has been the principal of a couple of schools. She developed an alternative middle school science curriculum for Shiksha Mitra, Kolkata, a school for slum children in 2007. She also developed the middle school science curriculum for the school Krishnamurti, for the school, which is of the Krishnamurti Foundation, India, Chennai, in March to May 2006, so as to suit their unique needs and ethos. Her research interests currently focus on teacher development through reflective practice. She has done a lot of work and has several publications to her credit. They include A Learning Community of Reflective Teachers from Whispers to Resonance, which is the latest, published in 2024. Her other publications include The Reflective Learners Seeing Missed Takes in Mistakes. Then she has also published Teaching Tales, Learning Trails. Also, The Reflective Teacher, Alternative Schooling in India, Childhood Regained, Curiouser and Curiouser. Some of these are co-authored. So we have Dr. Neerja Raghavan, who's worked a lot on teacher development and learning processes, and she is a very well celebrated author also with us. Karthikeya, you may take this forward. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this nice introduction. Thank you for this opportunity. As I was introduced, I am basically a teacher educator. And so I will be focusing today more on teacher development and a little bit on students, how they can learn better. So I will share my screen and I hope you can see it. Karthikeya, all good? You can see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm talking of rethinking school education by changing processes of teaching and learning. There are so many processes of teaching and learning. I'm going to focus on just 3 today. First is, how does one go about changing a teacher's approach in the classroom? I'll be talking of a couple of ways that we at Thinking Teacher have tried. How does one change the way a student regards mistakes? That's going to be the second thing. And the third is, I'll give you a glimpse of how we try to change the way science is experienced, both by the teacher who's teaching it and the student who's learning it. So this is broadly my roadmap today. So I'll begin with, how do we go about changing a teacher's approach in the classroom? I think we've all had a mix of good, bad, and not so good teachers when we were in school. And we know what it means to have a teacher who simply rivets your attention. And we also know what it means to have a teacher who just can't seem to hold your attention. So as a teacher developer, I feel it is very, very important to bring about a change in a teacher's approach in the classroom, because that is like the key that unlocks many doors. So I'm going to give you an example by sharing what a teacher of EVS, Environmental Science, of 4th grade in Azim Premji School, Uttarakhand, his experience. Now, this is a school where Hindi was the medium of instruction. And in his class, he had a few children, some 5 children, who were refugees from Bangladesh. And therefore, they could only speak and understand Bengali. Now, he was teaching EVS. And the EVS was being taught in Hindi. So he didn't want to turn his EVS class into a Hindi class. He said, Hindi, though, they're already learning in a separate, the Hindi teachers teaching them Hindi. So his dilemma was, how do I get these children who don't know the medium of instruction to participate in EVS without my turning into a Hindi teacher? Now, this is there on YouTube as a video. I'm not going to show you the entire video. I'm going to show you just a small portion of it. You can always access it later. And I'm going to share you the part where he talks about the impact of what he did known as action research. I'll be talking about this a little later. He did action research to address the problem of how to include all the fourth graders in his class without turning into a teacher of Hindi. He was very clear that no student should feel lesser or greater. So he didn't want to separate out the 5 children who didn't know Hindi and teach them separately. They would immediately sense that there's something not so okay about them. Nor did he want to get the others to feel that they were better. He wanted to make it an inclusive class. This was a very important consideration. He stuck to it throughout his action research. So he was going to teach animal habitat, and he designed an activity where he said, I'm going to only demand drawing. Even if a child doesn't know Hindi, the child can draw. So he gave them the task that each of you go home and bring 3 chits. In each chit, you draw some animal or bird. This was a task given to all the children in the class. So about 30 children came next day there were total about 90 chits. He placed all the chits in a central heap, and the students sat in a circle in the periphery. Having done that, in the 4 corners of the room, he drew 4 different habitats: land, water, air, land and water. And having done that, he asked each child one by one to come to the center, pick up a chit, examine that drawing, decide where that animal or bird lived, and quietly go and stand in that corner. So as they did this, if you watch the entire YouTube video, you will see how it panned out. Slowly, those children who are not speaking, they started feeling confident that even if they could speak, they could do this correctly. And once they started getting a little more confident, they didn't mind making mistakes when they spoke in Hindi. They started speaking in Hindi. And now that they were not afraid to make mistakes, their Hindi also grew, their confidence grew, and they've started participating in the EVS class. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you, I must apologize for the quality of the video. This was taken in 2013, before all these smartphones were really everyone's property. So it was taken on an old camera of mine called flip video camera. So please forgive the quality of the video. He's talking about the impact of his action research. कार्तिकेय, if the sound is not there, please show me a thumb.
एक्टिविटी नहीं होती थी। मेरी जो क्लास होती थी ना, लेसन प्लान होता था, उसमें एक्टिविटी की बस एक या 2 दिन का वो रहता था। ऐसा रहता था कि जैसे मैंने 2 दिन उनसे बात की, पढ़ाया और फिर एक्टिविटी कराया। 1 दिन करा दी, 2 दिन कराई, बस उससे ज़्यादा मेरी एक्टिविटी नहीं होती थी। लेकिन अब जो है मैं मेन सोचता हूँ कि इस लेसन प्लान को मैं सिंपल ज़मीन पर किस तरह से लेकर आऊँ, कि ये पढ़ाना कुछ नहीं है मेरे को, और खाली हम सब मिलके कुछ काम करें जिससे कि वो सीखें। पढ़ाने का मतलब ये नहीं रहा है कि हम बैठे हैं, ज्ञान दे रहे हैं और बच्चे सीख रहे हैं। अब उनकी तरफ से भी बहुत सारी चीज़ें आती हैं, तो उससे मुझे ये फ़ायदा हुआ है कि मेरे को अब एज ए टीचर बहुत ही ज़्यादा मतलब अच्छा लगता है, सुकून मिलता है। कि एक तो मुझे ये भी लगता है, पहले मैं ही बोलता रहता था, सारी मेहनत मेरी होती थी, और कुछ बच्चे शायद ना भी सुनते हो, मुझे क्या पता होता था, वो इधर उधर से देख के असेसमेंट में जब करता तो कर देते हो। लेकिन अब ज़्यादातर उनकी तरफ से आता है, जब उनको मौका मिलता है वो ऑब्जर्वेशन करने का और एक्टिविटी करके सीखने का, तो वो जो बातें बोलते हैं ना, उससे मुझे भी बहुत सारी बातें सीखने के लिए मिलती हैं।
और क्या क्या बदलाव आए हैं एक्शन रिसर्च के द्वारा?
मैम, एक्शन रिसर्च के बाद मुझे सबसे अच्छा ये लगा है कि मेरी क्लास में जो ये बच्चे थे ना, ये सबसे बड़ी बात तो ये है कि अब ये अपने आप को समझ लगे, इनके अंदर कॉन्फिडेंस आया है।
आपको कैसे पता चला कि इन 5 बच्चों में शुरू से अब तक कुछ बदलाव आया है?
कि मैम पहले क्या था ना, पहले वो बोलते ही नहीं थे। जब मैं उनसे पूछता था तो वो बोलते नहीं थे, तब मेरे को लगता था शायद इनको समझ में ही नहीं आया, इनको आया ही नहीं है। तब मेरे को इतना ज्ञान नहीं आया था कि इनको कॉन्फिडेंस नहीं है, या क्या पता इनको कुछ ना कुछ आता होगा, बोलते तो होंगे। फिर धीरे धीरे इसीलिए मैंने उनको एक्शन रिसर्च में लिया। थोड़ा बहुत जब बुलाता था तो थोड़ा बहुत बोलते थे, तभी भी उनको ये डर लगता था कहीं मैं गलत तो नहीं बोल रहा हूँ। लेकिन जब उनको एक्शन रिसर्च में आने के बाद मुझे ये मिला कि यार इनको कॉन्फिडेंस दो, तभी ये कुछ करेंगे। धीरे धीरे मेरे को लगा, तो वो खोज हुई, तो उस तरह से मेरे को लगा कि हाँ ये कर सकते हैं। तब जाके अब एक्शन रिसर्च में जब उनको कॉन्फिडेंस मिला तो वो करा उन्होंने अच्छी तरह से, और उन्हें समान अवसर मिला एक तरह से, तो उन्होंने किया। तो इस तरह से मेरे को लगा कि पहले वो बोलते नहीं थे, कुछ भी उनका पता ही नहीं चलता था। कि जब वो बोलते नहीं थे तो मेरे को यही लगता था कि इनको आया नहीं है।
तो क्या अभी वो लिख भी पाते हैं? कुछ नहीं
कुछ मतलब कुछ लिख देंगे, लेकिन वो ना के बराबर ही है। उसमें 2-3 बच्चों ने बल्कि लिखना शुरू किया क्योंकि उनके साथ अलग से भाषा में काम हो रहा है।
आपका असेसमेंट मेथड ही बदल चुका है एक्शन रिसर्च के दौरान।
लिखित पे उन बच्चों को मैं देता हूँ लिखित के लिए जो
लिख
पाते हैं उनके लिए। इनके लिए तो सिंपल ये है कि आप जो है मगर क्वेश्चन सेम होगा, उसमें ये है कि क्वेश्चन सेम होगा उसमें, और ये भी नहीं होता कि भाई अलग पता चल जाए उनको। उसमें ऑप्शन ये रहता है कि जिसको चित्र बनाना है चित्र बना लेगा और जिसको लिखना है वो लिख देगा। तो इसमें कुछ बच्चे ऐसे भी हैं जो लिखना जानते हैं लेकिन अब वो चित्र बना के ले आते हैं, लेकिन फिर भी उनको समान अवसर देने के लिए। और मेरे को क्या चाहिए, मेरे को ये देखना है कि उनको आया नहीं आया।
बिल्कुल।
तो इसलिए मेरे को वो दिक्कत नहीं है। थोड़ा इसमें ऐसा होता है कि जो बच्चे लिखना जानते हैं वो चित्र बना के ले आते हैं, कोई ऐसे बच्चे होते हैं जो दोनों काम कर लाते हैं। और जो अब एक्शन रिसर्च वाले में से 2-3 बच्चे ऐसे हैं जो कि थोड़ा थोड़ा लिखने की कोशिश करते हैं। मेरी क्लास में 4th के बच्चे भी अब इस तरह से भी जो एक्शन रिसर्च वाले भी हैं वो भी अब पूछने लगे हैं। जो अभी भले से ही वो ये पूछते हैं, जैसे उनको काम नहीं आ रहा तो वो आके पूछते हैं सर हमें ये काम नहीं आ रहा। तो मेरे लिए यही बता रहा, क्योंकि ये चीज़ आई तो अब जब अगर वो बोलेंगे ही नहीं तो मैं कब तक उनके अंदर, जब वो बोलेंगे हमारा इंटरेक्ट होगा तभी तो मैं उनकी प्रॉब्लम समझूंगा, आगे आएंगे। तो इस चीज़ से मेरे को बहुत फ़ायदा और क्लासों में भी बहुत फ़ायदा हुआ। एक और एक्टिविटी की अप्रोच ली जिसमें ये आया था कि मछली सांस कैसे लेती होगी। हम इस पे बात कर रहे हैं कैसे सांस लेती होगी। तो जो बच्चे थे वो कह रहे थे कि नीचे से ऊपर आती है, सांस लेती है, फिर नीचे चली जाती है, इस तरह से चल रहा था। लेकिन 4-5 दिन तक चलने के बाद सब बच्चे हो गए, सबको ये लग रहा था कि मतलब जो कंफ्यूज हो गए थे कि नहीं हमें नहीं, मतलब ये है कि ऊपर आती है सांस लेके नीचे जाती है। जो भी वो लेकर आते थे मैं उसमें क्वेश्चन उठा देता था उन पर कि अगर ऐसा होता तो ये मछली फिर ऊपर ही क्यों नहीं रह सकती अगर ऐसा होता तो लास्ट में सबको ऐसा लगा कि सर हमें नहीं पता नहीं कैसा होगा, लेकिन वो अपनी आवाज़ पे अड़े हुए थे कि नहीं वो तो ऊपर आती है और सांस लेके जाती है। और वो इसको प्रूव भी कर रहे थे। वो यहाँ मछली भी लेकर आए, मछली दिखाई, बाल्टी में रख दिया, बोले सर अब देखिए ये बार बार ऊपर आएगी। तो अब मछली आ भी रही थी, ऊपर आ रही थी बार बार जब वो शांत बैठे हुए थे। तो मैं तो कह रहा देखिए आती है, सांस लेती है। एक बच्चे ने बोला सर मैंने देखा है कि मेरे दादा जब बड़ी मछली लेकर आए थे तो उसके यहाँ से बुलबुले निकल रहे थे, यहाँ से। तो मैंने कहा ये चीज़ इसने जो बोली है ना, इस चीज़ को आप खोजो, इस चीज़ पे आप रिसर्च करो। तो मुझे सबसे अच्छा ये लगा कि चाहे एक्शन रिसर्च की वजह से हुआ, कम से कम ये ऑब्जर्व करके अपनी बात बोल तो रहे हैं, भले से ये लिख ना पाए, पढ़ ना पाए, लेकिन ऑब्जर्व करके बोलना यही मेरे लिए बहुत अच्छी बात है। और जहाँ पर मैं अब एवरेज जिन बच्चों को समझता हूँ वो भी चुप हो गए, वहाँ ये बोलने लगे, तो ये मेरे लिए बहुत।
क्या कारण हो सकता है कि इनको ये सूझा और उनको नहीं सूझा? व्हाट डू यू थिंक?
मैम मुझे कारण तो देखिए मैम, मुझे लगता है कि वो ऑब्जर्वेशन के ऊपर बात है, उसका दिमाग खुला, वो ऐसी और भी चीज़ें देखता होगा, निसंदेह बात है कि वो और भी चीज़ें देखता होगा, लेकिन उसे एक्सप्रेस करने का मौका नहीं मिला या तो या हमारी कहीं ना कहीं गलती रही होगी कि हम उसे ये समझते हैं कि अगर ये लिख नहीं पढ़ नहीं सकता तो ये पढ़ ही नहीं कुछ ही नहीं जानता है। लेकिन जब उसको कॉन्फिडेंस आया, उसको हमने कहा कि अच्छा तुमने कुछ देखा, उसका ये हाथ उठाना ही मेरे लिए बहुत बड़ी बात है, क्योंकि वो उठाता ही नहीं था हाथ। और उसका इसके इफेक्ट है ना, और भी सब्जेक्ट में उसको इफेक्ट पड़ा है, मैथ्स वगैरह में उसको इम्प्रूव है। जो मतलब मैं क्लास टीचर हूँ उनका 4th का, तो मुझे जो रिपोर्ट मिली है उसमें उसने मिला कि उनका इम्प्रूव है, जो पहले से था वो इम्प्रूव है हर एक सब्जेक्ट। तो मेरे को लगा कि हाँ कॉन्फिडेंस से कुछ ना कुछ तो होता ही होगा, क्योंकि वो देखते तो हैं ही, हर एक बच्चा देखता है उस तरह से, ये मुझे लगा।
So I want to draw your attention to the fact that in his action research, he certainly effected a great improvement in the performance and learning of the students. But the more important thing, the deeper thing, is that his thinking changed. When the thinking of the teacher changes, a huge door opens up. He said a very important thing. He said, I used to think that when a child doesn't answer in class, that child doesn't know anything. Now I learned that if a child doesn't answer in class, it may not be because a child doesn't know anything. It's probably because the child lacks confidence. And that's a huge thing that he's learned that. So you may wonder, was this a fluke? This teacher learning what he learned and getting the students to learn better? So I want to submit, no, it wasn't. There were many teachers who did action research, and one of them managed to improve the English vocabulary of her 5th graders. This was also in Azim Premji School, Uttarakhand. Another in a school in Andhra Pradesh, residential school in Andhra Pradesh. She's a senior citizen. She suddenly became an EVS teacher after having been needlework teacher and dining hall manager. And this is in an alternative school where students speak their mind. So when she walked into class saying, I'm going to teach you EVS, because the principal had asked her to, the children told her very bluntly, Akka, you can't teach EVS, Akka. You're a dining hall manager, Akka. You're a needlework teacher, Akka. So in their mind, she was old lady. She was old lady, grandmother. She could only do kitchen kind of stuff. and how she broke that stereotypical image and how she transformed her class. And now they said, will you teach us EVS next year also? I missed your classes when they went to the higher class. This paper is on our website, how she transformed her image, her class, and her own thinking. Another student, another teacher, again in Azim Premji School, Uttarakhand, he found he was teaching science in a very boring way, giving them all the facts. And he said, I don't think this is science. Science is when you ask lots of questions. My students aren't asking any questions. So he turned around his science classes through his action research when the students began asking lots and lots of questions. Again, in the same Azim Premji School, Uttarakhand, there were these teachers who had a mixed class of 6th graders. Some of them had come from schools where they had learned the fundamentals. Some of them had come from schools where they had not learned. They didn't even know place value. And they were in the 6th grade. So these two teachers who were teaching that class said, how are we going to teach the entire class, the syllabus of the 6th standard, without getting some of them bored or getting some of them to feel this is overhead transmission? So that's another interesting action research. All this has been compiled into a book. And in the same school, the teacher who, again, the same Bangladesh refugee children who didn't know Hindi were in a class mixed with all other students who knew Hindi. So how is this teacher going to improve the Hindi reading and comprehension of these 5 students without getting the others bored? You can read that paper too in the book. So this is all due to a magic known as action research. What is this action research? It's just a big name. Give it to something we all do probably every day. We don't know it's called action research. It's just these 4 steps. You plan something, you act on the plan, you observe as you're acting on the plan how it's going, and then you reflect on the whole process. We do this all the time. We don't know that we're following all these steps. But what is important is a teacher who undertakes to do action research has to first recognize that there is a problem, something to be addressed. So they have to recognize that there is a need to change. Once they do that, they have to be open and submit to the process of change. And then reflect on the entire process. So at Thinking Teacher, we facilitate the action research of teachers. And I learned early on the lesson that I should not provide solutions. Because my job is just to bring about that thinking, facilitate thinking in the teacher. And the teacher knows his or her context the best. And they will come up with the solutions best suited to their environment. So although it is very tempting for a teacher, I've been a teacher for so many years, teachers love to tell. So they love to give you the answer. So I have to keep holding back and saying, no, don't give them the answer. Let them find the answer that suits them. I may not even know the answer that suits them. And this is what we call the reflective teacher program, which is offered by Thinking Teacher. So what are the steps in action research? I'm breaking it down. The first thing they have to do is identify the problem. Unless you know what you want to address, you can't begin, right? Having identified the problem, they then analyze it. Why is it a problem? Is it a problem with all the students? Is it only with some? Is it a problem I face every day? Is it only on some days? And so on. So they analyze the problem in order to understand it in depth. And then they identify different strategies to address the problem. So they may come up with more than one strategy. And then what they do is they implement one selected strategy, which they select based on some factors, some constraints or some considerations. Once they've selected the strategy, they observe how it works as they're implementing it. And then they reflect on the entire process and ask themselves, how much did it address the problem? How much did it change the problem? Sometimes it changes the problem. If it changes the problem, they go back and identify the new problem. So it's a whole cycle again. It's as simple as that. And all it requires is, my job is to just keep asking the right questions as a facilitator. And they think through the whole process. And I always say, action research, if you go so systematically, you're bound to address the problem. Unless it's something very impossible, you're bound to address the problem. So I always say the real fruit of action research is not so much in solving the problem as it is in effecting a change in the thinking of the teacher. As I gave you that example, Mohit, the teacher in that video, his thinking changed. Once the teacher's thinking changed, it's a huge door which has opened up. This is an example of a teacher with 17 years experience. The teacher who improved the English vocabulary of her students in the 5th grade. She actually said her reflection at the end of the action research. She says, before doing action research, my focus used to mainly be on completing the syllabus. But while doing action research, I realized that far more important than completing or not completing the syllabus is to find out how much each child has understood. So this is, I think, a tectonic shift in the thinking of a teacher and a 17 years experienced teacher. Because finishing the syllabus is what everyone is after. The principal tells the teacher, finish the syllabus. The parents say, have you finished the syllabus? Exams are looming on the teacher's head and the student's head. So have you finished the syllabus? This becomes like the overriding concern. At the end of it, the only one who finishes the syllabus really is the teacher. And interestingly, we use the word cover the syllabus. Actually, we literally covered it. The teacher doesn't, only the teacher has covered it. The students, for them, it's covered. They don't know what's happened. So if a 17-year experienced teacher after action research can feel that no, syllabus coverage is not the important thing. I should start seeing how much each child has understood. I think that's a wonderful fruit of action research. And that has been compiled into this book, all those stories I told you about. And I acknowledge Azim Premji Foundation because this is the work I did in my last year at that university. You can find the list of the publications here. So I always like to compare what we call reflective practice. This is a much tossed around word in the education circles. What is reflective practice? I like to compare it with the background scale in a concert. If we've been to classical music concerts, there is a tanpura, a drone, which is going all through, even when the artist is stopping in the middle to drink some water, talk to the mridangist, talk to the tabla, the drone is going on. The drone is persistent. So reflective practice is not something that a teacher has to find time for, apart from their hugely loaded workday. It has to be like a drone going on in the background. And they should be asking themselves questions like these. How should this be taught? There shouldn't be one set way of teaching anything. There should be a constant nagging discontent. Am I teaching it in the same way? Do I need to tweak it? Do I need to change it? How should this be taught? Why is it important for students to learn this? Just because CBSE or ICSE or Cambridge says so? Why is it important? I remember as a student, my physics teacher walking into our 10th standard and saying, consider a candle. And why should I consider a candle? I'm not at all interested in considering a candle. And she dictated notes on how we should observe a candle and what is luminosity and how is it measured. None of it was my agenda. So I always say a teacher's agenda is first to make their agenda the agenda of the student. And you can do that by hooking the student's attention. So the student has to feel it is important to learn that. When is it best for them to learn it? Sometimes concepts which are set according to the textbook and the syllabus, they are way above or way below a student's pitch, where you can pitch. And students are different across the country, even within a class. A teacher knows, she can feel the pulse of the students' minds. So they can decide whether or not to pitch it then, or pitch it higher, or pitch it lower. When is it best to learn this concept? Once the class is over, every teacher should ask themselves, how did my class go today? Did it go well? Was it a disaster? Was it okay? Why wasn't I getting the attention of many students in today's class? Where was their attention? What could I have done to bring their attention back into the lesson? What did I assume about my students? Mohit assumed that if a student doesn't speak, unko kuch nahi aata. He revisited his assumption and revised it. That is important. How or when do I believe learning happens best? Some people feel it happens best outdoors. They take their students outdoors. That's a great idea when you're teaching EVS. The environment is right around you. So how or when do I believe learning happens best? Where can I go to develop better communication skills? I'm sure all of us have had teachers who were so boring, who communicated so badly that we felt like sleeping in their class. What a pity. A teacher who has the power to change the mind of every student in the class. What an enormous power. I always say the most powerful people are not the politicians. They are not the wealthy. Yes, wealth can cause change. Yes, if you're a politician, you can effect changes in the government. But a teacher can transform the mind of a learner. They are the most powerful. And for that, they have to develop good communication skills. How can I engage with the parents of my students so that they feel trusted? Karthikeya was just talking about a parent-teacher meeting he attended before he came to this session. I don't know about you, Karthikeya, but as a teacher, I often felt parent-teacher meetings were often like India and Pakistan meeting, both on the defense. The parent is coming, dare this teacher say anything against my child? And the teacher is saying, this parent is going to hear it about the student, not going to blame me for what has not happened with their child. So they both are very confrontational most often, without realizing that actually both of them have the interests of the same child at heart. They're on the same side of the table, not on opposite sides. So that trust has to be built between the parent and the teacher, that we are together in this game. We are not confronting each other. We are not opponents. And what can we do to enliven staff meetings? Staff meetings are often very top down. They are driven by the principal or the headmistress or the coordinator who's running the meeting. How can it become participatory? How can everyone feel like we are also involved in decision making? These are very important questions for reflection. So that's one approach I've talked about, how to bring about some change in a teacher's classroom practices. Another course that we offer from Thinking Teacher is called Reflective Writing, which started as an online course when COVID happened and has remained an online course thereafter. Currently, we are running the 15th batch, where we have 10 online classes for teachers. Each batch is about 10 to 12. And in these online classes, we read, discuss, reflect, and write. You'd be surprised how little teachers read. I don't blame them. They are overloaded with work. So the most they read is the textbook that they have to deliver. But during this course, I get them to read things outside the syllabus, things which make them think. Writings by educationists like John Holt, Parker J. Palmer, a writer like Tara Westover. And they start discussing student issues, parental concerns, report cards. And because these are teachers who are from different schools across the country, there is a very comfortable space. You know, teachers within a school, no matter how egalitarian the management, sooner or later, human beings being human beings, politics creeps in. There are ego issues. There are lack of trust issues. Will I be saying something which will be reported to the management? I better keep quiet. None of these issues are there in my online class because they're teachers across schools, different schools. They can freely share. So it's a lovely experience for teachers to realize they are not alone in their dilemmas. Everybody shares it with them. And together they can arrive at solutions. They can think together. So mostly teachers have shared with me that they feel so comforted. They were not struggling alone. They share different perspectives. Sometimes a teacher will say, you know, I face the same issue, but this is how I tackled it. Why don't you try this? So that works. And they listen to each other and they read aloud their writings. And if you go to the website on this particular link, you'll find compilations of each batch. 15 compilations are there of teachers. The end of the course, they don't get a certificate. In lieu of a certificate, their compilation is posted on the website. One sample piece by each teacher. The beautiful thing about this is that across batches, when the reflective writing happened, there were different teachers from each batch who said, we want to take this forward. How can we take this forward? Let's do more. Let's do more. And this resulted in an online learning community of reflective practitioners. We call ourselves L-Core, and this is our 5th year of meeting online periodically. We continue to do so, not for a course, not for any structured gain, just because we want to share what teaching and learning means to all of us. My dream is that such communities should form across the country. Teachers work in isolation. They are very lonely people. They need to share their work with others. They don't even know what their colleague in the staff room is doing because they are busy running in and out of the staff room, correcting notebooks, taking classes, attending meetings. They need to pause. They need to stop. They need to think. So why should a teacher reflect? If you're not already convinced, let me try and convince you. A teacher's job is very repetitive. They have to teach the same thing over and over again to different batches of students. And it's very easy to fall into that complacent illusion. I've got it. I know it. I don't have to prepare again. So that illusion that I got it and I know it is the most dangerous alarm bell for a teacher. Because that's when a teacher stops thinking. And a teacher who stops thinking is a very dangerous teacher to have. Because if a teacher stops thinking, students stop thinking. So the repetitive nature of a teacher's job lends itself easily into falling into a pattern, a set behavior pattern. But just a bit of reflection can turn things around. When a teacher reflects, students may also begin to reflect. And isn't that what we want? And what do you think would be the result of not reflecting at all? So here again, I want to share one more story, which is that when I was in my college years, in my BSc, I had a lecturer who taught us inorganic chemistry. And he walked into class. In one hand, he had the chalk duster. In the other hand, he had a yellowed sheaf of notes. Yellowed. So you know, he was using them since decades. He would come briskly into class, keep the duster and chalk down, keep the notes down, pick up the duster, clear the board, and take one page of the sheet, yellowed page, and start looking at it. And in his neat handwriting, transfer the notes from the paper to the board. Nitrogen, melting point, boiling point, properties, reaction. This was the whole class. Behind, there were young men and women from Delhi. The men would be whistling, thumping the desk, talking to each other. He was least bothered. He just kept writing, transferring content from his paper to the board. The bell rang. He walked out to do the same thing again, day after day. Not surprisingly, he sowed in me a lifelong hatred of inorganic chemistry. I love chemistry, but I hate inorganic chemistry. So I always wondered, did this teacher reflect at all? Did he ever ask himself, is what I'm saying getting into the minds of the students? Obviously not. He hardly looked at us. He was looking at the board and his page. So I'm sure many of us have had, if not so bad teachers, somewhere close to that. So isn't it important that they reflect? So now I'm going to the next part, which is how do we change the way a student regards mistakes? Mistakes are something that, although we say all the right things, that mistakes are important, we have to learn from mistakes. These are all lovely things to say. Just as we're going to say all nice things on the 5th of September, that teaching is a noble profession, teachers are wonderful, but for the rest of the year, we give teachers the election duty, census duty, SIR duty, and take them away from the class because we don't think teaching is that important. They can always go back to it later. But on 5th September, we say the right things. So like that, we say mistakes are very important to make mistakes. We must learn from mistakes. But every time you make a mistake, your marks get cut. You get low marks. How will you be encouraged to make mistakes? So here is something that a thinking teacher, my colleague who used to work in the Krishnamurti Foundation School, Chennai, the school, she once shared with me the minutes of one of her staff meetings, which raised beautiful questions. It raised questions like, let's look at mistakes. Why do students sometimes make the same mistake again and again? Why do some students make more mistakes than others? Why do adults find it more difficult to own up to mistakes than students? Why do students make less mistakes on the games field than in the classroom? When she shared these questions with me, Kamla Anil Kumar, she's my colleague and thinking teacher, I got very excited by these questions. I said, my God, this is so rich. We can do a workshop on it. So once we brainstormed on the workshop, it turned into a course. And the course was called The Reflective Learner, Seeing Missed Takes in Mistakes. And the premise of this book is nobody makes a mistake intentionally. I don't know it's a mistake. That's why I'm making it, right? So there's some thinking that's going on when I'm making that mistake. If only a teacher pauses and looks at what is my thinking, wouldn't that be much better? So all the work that teachers did was compiled into this book. And my co-speaker today, Kamla Mukunda, very generously accepted to write the foreword for this book. So it's a coincidence that we both are together here today. The book was compiled by me. Kamla wrote the foreword. And in this, we found that teachers gained a better understanding about students' thinking if they systematically studied students' mistakes. What do I mean by studied? The first thing the teacher had to do was create an atmosphere in the class where there was no shame in owning up to mistakes. And sometimes teachers had to spend 1 month on this because it's not easy to break free of that conditioning. Galti karna is wrong, no? Galti, the very word is it's wrong. So the teacher would start by saying, when I was in school, I used to make these kind of mistakes. Do you also make such mistakes? Oh, just yesterday, I made this mistake. Even when I was teaching, I made a mistake. How do you feel when you make a mistake? So this kind of, egalitarian conversation where the teacher seems human. She's not God. She makes mistakes too. Slowly, students started raising their hand. Yeah, teacher, I also made mistake. Oh, you did? Oh, that's okay. I've also made that mistake. So like this, they opened up the atmosphere to talking about mistakes. Once they did that, they started studying students' mistakes. And then they gave students plenty of time. They said, I'm not going to correct your sheet. First, what they did was they brought dummy worksheets, which they had themselves made mistakes which students usually make. And they gave those dummy worksheets uncorrected to the students and said, you act like teacher. Okay, they didn't say dummy. They said, I got these worksheets from a neighboring school. Can you see what mistakes the students have made? And students love to play teacher. So they corrected and said, yo, teacher, this student doesn't even know spelling. Yo, teacher, this student doesn't even know addition. How can they make such mistakes, teacher? Like that. So they felt thrilled. So then the teacher said, that's right, you've identified the mistakes. So let's see. Why do you think the student made this mistake? So then the student freely thought, I think teacher, maybe the teacher didn't teach them spelling properly. Or maybe they don't know that how to carry over and borrow. So once they've analyzed someone else's mistakes, now the teacher gave them the exercise of studying their own mistakes. Now they didn't feel so bad doing it. So they practiced how to spot their errors, analyze them, and overcome them. And in this way, teachers help them to acknowledge and analyze their errors in an atmosphere which is free of shame. Students started becoming aware of their own thinking. Why did I make this mistake? This is why I made this mistake. I was thinking like this. So they revisited their thinking and they started slowly catching their own errors. And they started taking greater charge of their own learning so that in the 4 chapters, the first chapter in this book is called Erring to Learn, where a teacher of English in a school in Sikkim, as she was doing this, she started changing her own thinking. She started realizing that a student who she thought, like Mohit, was dumb or was, slow learner, was actually just lacking confidence. When she gave that student enough room to express herself, that student blossomed. So Erring to Learn, what are the students' magical stories? If you read the book, you'll know I am, as a teacher educator, dwelling on what the teacher learned. Mathematics in slow motion. Here, a mathematics teacher, he started his work saying, in a school in Andhra Pradesh, residential school, he said, I want to get into the mind of my student. I thought that was a beautiful aim for a teacher. So he would give them problems and say, if you solve the entire problem and give me the answer, I'm going to cut marks. I want you to do only the step 1 and step 2. It was tantalizing for the students because they are dying to get to the right answer. That's what maths is all about, right? Get the right answer, get your marks, and get promoted or get a rank in class. He said, no, slow down. I'm giving you step 1, step 2. So the step 1 was, first, tell me what is the data given. You have to write that. Step 2, what is it you have to find out? Write that. When many students who were in a tearing hurry found it very irritating, but they slowed down. And when they did that, they unashamedly, 8th graders said, I didn't even know place value. I had not even learned place value. Now, Anna has taught me like this. I realize I need to learn place value. So there was a huge change in the way students viewed themselves and mathematics. That fear of mathematics went away. The next chapter is called 2 Wrongs Can Make a Right by an English teacher in Sikkim. As he was teaching the students to analyze their errors, he slowly started withdrawing the scaffolding. In the beginning, like most teachers, he would underline the word and write SP for spelling. Or he would underline the sentence and write GR for grammar. Slowly, he started writing SP, GR, etc. in the margin, saying, you find out. You locate your spelling error. You locate your grammar error. And he found that was amazing. They started doing it. The students started feeling empowered to find out where they had made a mistake. And why is it called 2 Wrongs Can Make a Right? He found that the number of errors slowly decreased as students became more and more aware of their thinking. But suddenly they started increasing. So when errors increase, you start cutting marks, right? But this teacher, because he was doing this work, he paused. He looked at it. He said, why are the errors increasing? And he realized that students were now getting confidence to use more difficult words. Their vocabulary had increased. They were going from writing simple sentences to complex sentences. If you go from writing simple sentences to complex sentences, your scope for making errors is more, right? You will make more errors. So this teacher said, I don't see this as something negative. It's positive. The students are becoming more confident about writing. So I was very tempted to name his chapter, Two Wrongs Can Make a Right. And lastly, there is a research paper by two mathematics students who very systematically use error analysis as an evaluation tool. And you have to read the book to know more about that. I wouldn't be able to go into that in detail right here. The last thing I'm going to show you is how a few colleagues of mine and I, on our online community, we devised stories to make science an experience for both teachers and children. And I'm going to tell you this as a story. And may I invite you, even if you know the answer, go back to your fourth grade. Pretend you're in fourth grade so you can enjoy the story with me. This pedagogy uses storytelling by first hooking the learner with a story. So I learned my lesson from my physics teacher who said, consider a candle. I saw that she was missing hooking my attention. So now we hook the learner with a story. Who doesn't like a story? Even at my age, I would love to listen to a story. We then engage the learner in the process. We provoke their thinking and we enable debate and discussion so that we open up the possibility of experimenting. So here I'm going to start with a story card. Please bear with me as I read it out. You're all in your fourth grade. Go back to your fourth grade. And I'm telling you, in Indonesia in 1886, a strange disease had broken out. For nearly 20 years, a mysterious illness called beriberi has been affecting people across East Asia. The disease has hit Indonesia especially hard, where many sailors have fallen sick. The word beri, derived from Sinhalese, means weak in the local Indonesian language, which reflects the primary symptom of the illness. People who catch beriberi feel very weak. They have mood swings, loss of appetite, stomach pain, but everyone believes it's caused by bad air or miasma. Now, the story card behind has questions for the students to think. What would you look for as evidence to support the theory that foul air was causing the disease? And how would you go about conclusively showing that foul air is not responsible for the disease? Many different people worked hard to solve this problem. And there were all these scientists at the time that the germ theory was being proposed. These scientists said, oh, we are going to catch the germ. We know now that there is a germ for every disease. So let's find out which is the germ causing beriberi. And Eichmann, who was a scientist, he said, I'm going to find out, because I worked with Robert Koch for 2 years, I'm going to study the microorganisms that have been found in the dead bodies of patients who succumbed to beriberi. If I inject these germs into monkeys, they will get beriberi for sure. But to his surprise, he found that the animals didn't get sick, even when he injected them. He said, okay, there must be an incubation period. So he took chickens and he divided them into two groups. He injected one group with the germ and left the other uninfected. So the children are asked, why do you think he chose to work with chickens? Why do you think he divided them into two groups? So having injected one with the germ and the other not injected, he found both developed beriberi after some weeks. So now you are asked, why do you think Eichmann guessed that the first group must have spread the disease to the other, which has not injected the germ? That's how they got the disease. And if he made that guess, how do you think Eichmann could have verified this guess? I hope you're getting the general drift, because I'm going a little fast because I think I'm exceeding my time. So Eichmann repeated his experiment with new chickens, and he said there's no way the first group can infect the second. He put them separately, isolated. To his surprise, all the chickens developed beriberi. And all of them recovered. So now, instead of answers, Eichmann found himself facing even more questions. He said it can't be the microorganism. After all, one group had been injected with the germ, the other had not, and they were isolated. It could not be the air around them. Both of them were in the same environment. What could it be? Now it turned out that there was a cook who had been feeding the chickens, And that cook went on leave and another cook came and continued feeding the chickens. So this was conducted by a teacher in Adyar Theosophical Academy, Chennai, this class. And she made one of the teachers with her act like the cook. And he came in and said, I fed the chickens and then I went on leave and somebody else came and fed the chickens. So the children were asked questions to the cook. So the children interviewed the cook. Here are the questions the children asked the cook. What did you feed the chickens? Did you feed them anything other than rice? From which place did you get the rice? How did you interact with the chickens? Did you have any illness at that time? When did you switch from unpolished to polished rice? So the initial cook had been feeding the chickens unpolished rice, polished rice. And when he left and the other cook came, he said, why waste polished rice on chickens? Let me give them unpolished rice. So when polished rice was given to chickens, they developed beriberi. When unpolished was given, they recovered from beriberi. And this is a beautiful story of the discovery of vitamins because it was at a time when people were stuck in one way of thinking. They thought only the presence of a germ causes disease. It took a century with all the evidence staring them in the face for them to realize even the absence of something, namely a nutrient, can cause disease. So I love the story of the discovery of vitamins because it brings in metacognition, thinking about thinking. And this ended with the students, when they were divided into groups in Adyar Theosophical Academy, asking the 4 groups of children, why do you think the chickens got the disease? Only one group was thinking, maybe it's not caused by a germ at all. By the end of the transaction, that group was dancing. Akka, we are scientists. We are scientists. We knew right in the beginning that it's not a germ causing it. It's the absence of the vitamins. So this is a beautiful way for children to feel that a scientist is human. Scientists make mistakes. And if they can discover, we too can discover. So I'm going to play for you a student testimonial. This is my last slide. I'm sorry, Kamla, for overshooting.
Story cards. How did you engage with science?
So,
What was expected out of you in these sessions?
to find out the cause, and also the last thing was eat vegetables, eat good food, and good food, because of good food that beriberi is causing because of vitamin B1. We learned it in a fun way instead of, because always they say eat good food, eat a rainbow plate. It will be boring. You'll be like, oh, okay. But the learning in this way, you get to analyze the incidents that happened before and learn from it.
Have you made any changes post these sessions in your diet?
Yeah,
What
of course.
changes?
Yeah. So before like that, I used to eat weekly 2 ice creams, 2 junk foods a lot. But when I learned this beriberi, I was so scared that what if it gets into me? What will I do?
But beriberi is not there now, no?
Yeah, what if it happens one
else?
more time?
Oh, okay.
What if any other disease forms again and I was the first one to get it? So then I will be shattered. Like, I can't do anything then. That's why now I don't, twice a month only I eat 1 ice cream. Nowadays I don't even eat ice cream.
Thank you, Surya. You think science should be taught like this?
Yes.
For other students also?
Yeah.
Like you? Across
Yes.
the country?
Across all the
world?
country.
Thank you. And sorry for overshooting.
Thank you very much, Nirja ma'am, for that insightful and thought-provoking address. A lot of things I could relate actually as an educator, as a teacher. The reflection on the notion of covering the syllabus, the limitations of conventional teaching methods, and the repetitive nature of a teacher's work encouraged us to look beyond and merely completing the curriculum towards understanding what and how students are actually learning. The importance of becoming reflective practitioners, systematically studying students' mistakes and using action research to examine and improve classroom practices provides a very meaningful foundation for our conversation on how we understand and measure learning. So once again, thank you very much. That was a very nice presentation. Really enjoyed it. So now it's my privilege to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Kamala Mukunda, author, educational psychologist, and teacher at Center for Learning, Bangalore. Dr. Mukunda holds a PhD in educational psychology and has worked extensively at the intersection of psychology and education. She has been associated with the Center for Learning, a teacher-run school near Bangalore, where she has worked closely with children and teachers. She is also the author of What Did You Ask at School Today, a handbook of child learning, and its second volume, books that draw on research in child psychology and learning and what makes it accessible to teachers and parents. The title itself is particularly relevant to our conversation. What did you ask at school today? It shifts our attention from simply asking what did the child answer to asking what did the child wonder about. Dr. Mukunda, thank you for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you here. I would like to begin with perhaps the most fundamental question. What does an examination actually measure? An examination is at best a limited sample of a student's performance. How do we make a defensible judgment about competence? And can a test measure the wrong thing but measure it very reliably? Dr. Mukunda, over to you.
Thanks, Kartike. And thank you to Anekdhara also for this opportunity. And Nirja, it was such a rich presentation. I hope I can be as listener friendly as you were. Okay, so if I can just make one distinction between the kind of assessment that one does in the course of school or college, while you're doing your courses, there are assessments, and on the other side, entrance exams, which are a very different kind of assessment because their role is very specific. It's of prediction. You're predicting future performance, right? But in a course of learning, assessment is a measure little bit of the past of what has been learned and how well it's been learned. So I'm just going to talk about that first. Okay, competence and assessment in the regular course of education. Okay, so competence has to be defined on its own terms, right? All too often, competence gets circularly defined as doing well on the test that was designed to measure competence. I'll just explain this a little bit. So, as a teacher, I also fall for this trap sometimes. I teach high school math. And when my students do well in their 10th exams, I feel like, phew, I feel reassured. Okay, I taught them well. Now, what's wrong with that? Right? It doesn't seem like anything wrong with that. It is a problem. It's called teaching to the test. See, I should have an independent sense of what their competence should be at the end of my 2 years of teaching them. Uh, for instance, in our school, because we're an autonomous school, we've got our own syllabus of math topics. It includes things that aren't included in the 10th exam. For example, there isn't any Euclidean geometry in the exam, but we felt it was important for our students to have, an idea of axioms and proofs and many other such topics, right? So I should not be measuring my students' competence by that exam, especially me, who knows very well that I have set up the course to be a different thing than the exam. So teachers should, in general, sit and think about the aims of a course, what they want their students to walk away with, and it could be, depending on the subject, could be problem solving ability, use an algorithm correctly in a situation, remember important names and dates, understand complex factors that lead to a war. So there are many, many things that I can include in my list. Now, feedback about students' learning it's only partially from their performance on a final exam. Actually, a final exam is quite useless in terms of remedying any gaps in learning, right? Final exams are an example of what you call summative assessment. It's not useful to student or teacher to get that grade 2 weeks after school closed. And teachers often, it reflects a teacher attitude like, well, I did my job, some kids got it and some didn't, and then it's over now, next batch. So more useful feedback comes continuously, actually, while you are teaching, if you know how to look for it. An interactive classroom gives a lot of information about where each child is at any given moment. And even if you don't test the child formally at all, you diligently correct their regular assignments and their classwork, tells you all you need to know. And all these are examples of formative, what we call formative assessment, where it's informing me all the time about oh, I must not have explained this well enough because they didn't get it. Or this kid didn't get that, let me try again. These are all examples of formative assessment. And useful feedback comes from other unexpected places too. Sometimes the physics teacher colleague in our school, he will say, your math kids, they can't interpret speed time graphs. I'm teaching them speed time and they're not able to. Or the ecology teacher will say, your math students, they can't even convert properly from one unit to another. Now, I realize that all this is a part of the competence I want my students to have. And I take that feedback and I work on it. I don't say, how come they finished those 2 chapters? So, it's not my problem. So competence has to go beyond the confines of the textbook set problems and certainly beyond exam performance. Let me illustrate the relationship between competence and assessment through another example. These are my senior school psychology courses. So I teach psychology. I'm a student of psychology and I love it. I teach it the way I want to, with my ideas of competence in mind. It's a long list of aims that I have. Being able to read complex text, reading between the lines, ask good questions, summarize appropriately, use technical terms effectively. So many things are on my list. Now, if I were to make the test for my psych course, it would look a little different from the external Cambridge exam that they finally sit for. And I think that's good. It means I have an opinion on what competence means for my students. I'm able to distinguish it from the official assessment. And with a reasonably good exam, like the Cambridge exam, the assessment is it's a subset of my definition of competence. It allows me to teach for what I want, right? While also teaching for what the exam wants. If the exam is a poorly designed one, the overlap between assessment and competence can become very small. And I didn't make slides, I apologize. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Kartike, you can see this?
Yes, ma'am. Slightly, if you could show it in front of the camera.
Should I put it closer or further?
Lift it high up.
It's visible.
Yeah.
Yes,
Is that
closer,
fine?
A
closer.
little more.
A bit higher, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Yes,
good.
yes.
So
Yes,
can
yes,
you
yes.
tell me, Kartike, what do you see
Yes.
in this picture? Situations where
Just assessment, it's a Venn diagram, I feel like. Competence,
yes.
assessment, okay.
Yeah, there is a
So
assessment.
competence and assessment, they overlap.
Yes.
Okay. And there's one diagram in which competence and assessment, I believe they are quite apart. They're
Yeah,
separate.
completely separate. Yeah.
Yes.
And
And
one
one of
is
them, the
assessment
assessments
is
portion,
within the subset of competence.
Yeah.
competence, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm sure there are other ways of drawing these two circles, and it might be fun for you to do it just to see what it would mean about the relationship between the two and what is an ideal situation for us. You might think that an ideal situation is 100% overlap between competence and assessment. I'm actually not so sure if that is an ideal thing because you know what kind of class has that? Coaching classes, right? They have a 100% overlap, and that's not actually a very good situation, right? I think many classrooms can drift towards this situation where teaching for the test can completely take over your course. It's called backwash, it's a technical term actually. And this, the worse designed the test is, the worse of a problem this is. Now, I'll just cover a few other reasons for the gap between competence and assessment. Exams are usually very heavily memory based, time bound, and individually taken. You take an exam alone, right? These three things: memory, time, and individual. The last two conditions, that it's time bound and it's an individual activity, these don't reflect any kind of good learning space. If you think of anything that Neeraja said, you'll agree with me. Good learning spaces should be leisurely. Time shouldn't be a factor at all. And they should be collaborative, right? So it's a question whether are classrooms recreating exam conditions and making things in a classroom time bound, and everybody has to hide their work from each other, rather than it should be the other way around. Assessment should be recreating the classroom to the extent possible. The first point I made, that exams are memory based, there's some justification for that. At least I feel that memory is a part of competence, as long as it's not the kind of fact based rote trivia kind of memory that one sees in many exams. Meaningful memory can't be separated from competence, actually. So some innovative options have been tried for years, right? And they've really worked, like open book exams with much longer timelines, and collaborative projects where the group gets a grade. I know colleges where they do these. Unfortunately, schools don't do it as much as they could. Of course, each of these will have their flaws, and if you're in the mood, you can say, oh, but open book, the problem is AI, or oh, longer timelines, then, something you can have complaints. But I don't feel that giving up on these and returning to default modes is justified, because the problems with current assessment models are too many. And we've tried them for enough years, right? Almost 100 years. So we can try something else. Karthikeya, I'll stop for now. I'll pause for now. Maybe I'll take up the topic of entrance exams later in the second half. Do you have any question on what I've said so far?
Yes, not related to what I wanted to ask was that we have recognized many of the limitations of summative assessment, particularly when examinations become high stakes, and yet we continue to depend on them. Why do you think that is? Is it because examinations are educationally effective, or because they are simply scalable and administratively convenient?
Yeah, that's a good question. When you say summative, like I was saying, year-end exams, right? Where the results come in the holidays and the next year the teacher is different and nobody learns from those exams, right? I think we're just stuck in a rut, maybe, because we've been doing it this way for a long time. Your listeners may know this already, that the history of exams came many centuries ago, and I think in China they needed to select the right people for civil jobs. So it was more like a selection. It came in as a selection process, and year-end exams in schools came maybe about 100 years ago. And I think it was just pass fail at the time. So again, it was just a decision point. Do you move ahead or do you repeat the year? Now, when and why did it change to this thing where everybody gets a mark, a score, a rank? I think it shifted from being a decision point to being a way to motivate kids. And if exams have, summative assessments have become a way to motivate children, it's a huge mistake. We've made a very sad mistake. Far from motivating them, it's increased their stress and anxiety. So here I have some sharp questions, okay, because I've been teaching in a school for many years. And I'm just speaking now about a school environment, okay, not entrance exams yet. I'll get to those later. I have been working in this school called CF, Center for Learning, for many years. So there's some validity in what I'm asking and saying. So bear with me. Now, a school from age 6 to 18 is a contained situation, right? There is no need that I can see for winners and losers in this school. Everyone who starts school can finish school. Yeah. I don't think there's any need to create scarce resources within a school. By scarce resources, I mean like prizes and ranks, and these are all artificial ways to create scarcity. And with that scarcity, you're creating competition. And I think that's utterly artificial. Now, in this context, high pressure year end exams serve no purpose that I can see. I feel assessment can be far more sane and more humane, the formative kind of assessment. And in such a school, like I was speaking earlier, Karthikeya, the focus can be learning. That's what it's supposed to be, rather than performing or proving merit. Why should a child's job be to prove merit at all? Their job is to learn. Now, with the time saved, not having to prepare for summative exams and take exams and recover from exams, the child can learn so many more things across so many more domains. There can even be leisure, God forbid, in a school day, for unstructured play or curling up with a book or chatting with a friend or a teacher. Again, I'm saying all this because I've seen it in my own school, and that's why I know it's possible. And that's why my question is, why can't schools be like this? I'm really asking. It's not an irresponsible question. I feel somewhere we've decided that schools should be nothing more or less than a high pressure preparation for the real high pressure world. Okay, I'll just say that again. I feel we have decided, society, that schools should be a high pressure prep for the real high pressure world. Okay, now our school isn't high pressure. So the question we are often asked is, how are your students going to survive in the real world, which is full of competition and pressure? Okay, our kids do just fine, but that's not the point. The question is very revealing. The question reveals that we think children need to prepare for brutality by growing up in a brutal system, as if somehow a brutal childhood will teach them to cope better. And that's just wrong thinking. Sorry, I'll stop now. Karthik, you can, because time is also short.
I get it. So let me take that a step further. If a student's future depends heavily on performance in a single examination, how can we justify that as a fair measure of competence or potential? If a single examination isn't entirely fair, is there an
Yeah.
alternative that we can work on, fair, comparable, scalable, and resistant or to manipulation? What might such a system look like?
Yeah, so yeah, good that you brought it to entrance exams. Let's look at that now. So as I said earlier, entrance exams have a slightly different function. No, a very different function. They're intended to predict future competence, right? As in, how well will this person perform in law college? How well will they do in medical college? Okay, and hopefully that's a good indicator of how good a lawyer or how good a doctor you become. Though those links are, I think, much weaker even. But I'm just going to talk about entrance exam to a higher education center, right? Now, the picture, while in the earlier picture was Venn diagrams, the picture I'm going to ask you to think of here is a scatter plot. And again, I'll just tell me if I should go up or down on this. Is this fine?
Yeah, ma'am. Slightly up.
Slightly higher. Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah. Now we can see
Yes.
it.
Okay. So here you see a graph. On the x-axis is students' performance on an entrance exam, let's say NEET, for example, because it's been in the news, right? And on the y-axis, you have their performance in medical college or wherever they've sought admission, right? And a scatter plot like this shows you, this is what I would call, if you can see the dots, it's a weak to moderate correlation. Okay? That is, overall, yeah, overall on average, if you draw cutoff line on the x-axis and say only students above this cutoff can get admission, yeah, on average you will get students who will perform better, but you're going to miss out on a lot who would have performed well, like false negatives, and there may even be false positives. And I've also drawn this a bit stronger than it is, perhaps. Yeah, this correlation. The correlation I showed you is certainly better than a zero correlation, right? This kind of a weak correlation has been confirmed in research for multiple choice question exams like the SAT in the US, and here in India, the JEE and the NEET. This kind of scatter plot, okay, a weak to moderate correlation. One important and interesting point is that after selecting candidates, you have a narrow range of candidates, right? Because you selected the better ones. Now there is an almost zero correlation between their entrance scores and their success in college and beyond. It's a bit like, I'll just draw it and show you. I'll draw a line for where you take students. Can you see that line? The
Yes,
cutoff
ma'am.
score? Yeah. So if you look at only those students who made it into college, there's really no connection between their entrance exam score and how they do. Right? In fact, this is the way they extrapolate correlations in general. So this is all over the world, by the way. For example, medical schools in the US, they find an almost zero correlation between the levels of performance in the MCAT and overall success in producing a good physician, a good doctor. And they say this is because factors other than those measured by the MCAT, which is their version of NEET, are much more important in a successful good physician, right? In fact, Dr. Amber Habib, whom you may know of quite well, he's a math professor at Shiv Nadar. He's written an excellent article recently saying that MCQ entrance exams should be a minimum standard, not the entire basis for determining entry. In fact, he goes on to explain that coaching classes for the JEE, for example, have just learned to teach students tricks that can get them to answer quickly, because the JEE is a very tightly timed exam and they don't learn the math actually. So when he gets students that have passed, they actually haven't learned the math. They've just learned tricks that are getting them. So he says, and again, all around the world, there is a pull or a push to get students to get institutions of higher education to use more than simple MCQ tests.
Yeah. So I believe the next question, more or less, it has been answered. If we move beyond one examination, what should replace it? So there is one final practical challenge I would like to put to you. A teacher who knows a child over several years has a much richer picture of that child's learning
Yeah.
than any single examination can provide. But can we
Yeah.
realistically create a rich assessment system for millions of students across India? How do we balance the richness of individualized assessment with the need for standardization and compatibility at a scale? And could
Yeah.
technology help us solve this problem, or could it simply help us measure the wrong things more effectively?
I think you're right there, the last thing you said, because it'll be a temptation to use AI to grade exam essays. Anyway, let me just say, in many other countries, they are doing what you're saying. In addition to the standardized test, they use school academic records because they do trust teachers' opinions, and they use essays that the students write. They use statements about your objectives, and they use recommendations, and they use extracurricular activities. They sometimes even use interviews. And there are some Indian colleges that have started doing that, private ones, but yes. Huh? Also, I want to point out that high stakes exams, even MCQs, can be better designed. I am not sure if our NEET and JEE are well designed, right? Like the MCAT in the US, or the Australia has the GAMSAT for medical students. They are excellently designed. One can do a good job even there. But they also have essay questions. Essays are scored by expert human scorers. Subjectively, yes. Qualitatively. So, Kartikeya, I think we're too scared of subjectivity, frankly. I feel objectivity is overrated. All the most valuable competencies that a person has can only be assessed subjectively by a human being. Complex thinking, creative thinking, nuanced thinking. And when we stick to objective measures, we run the risk of becoming irrelevant, right? It's exactly what you said at the end, right? You'll be very good at measuring the wrong thing. Imagine if you were to measure the overall health of a person using just their height. It's highly reliable, it's quantitative, it's very objective, but it's completely invalid. So once again, we've been used to doing it one way. We're so afraid to give it up, I think. But can I just add one more thing, if I may go off on a bit of a rant for a bit? Sorry. I'm stepping behind assessment itself, because the scope of the problem of high stakes testing in India is it's huge. There are so many factors that contribute to this heavy burden that falls finally on who? On the shoulders of our young people, no? Society's expectations, young people's aspirations, globalized media, global economy, family pressure, discrimination, not enough jobs, and so on. Solutions have to come from many quarters at many levels. I'm not qualified to speak about any of this, but I do have a response because I look after young children. I send them out into the world at 18, and I have many thoughts about this. See, we acknowledge and accept without question that there are fewer opportunities than people seeking them. Then you have to accept that only the deserving will get, and the rest have to settle for something much less. I'm using a lot of these air quotes because none of these things I agree with, right? This is the classic argument for a meritocratic system. But what if we are allowed to question these axioms? Like, how do we define a meaningful job? How do we define a meaningful life? Maybe our parameters are too narrow, restricted to like the size of your paycheck or something. I mean, then it will feel like there are too few opportunities for too many young people. I feel we need to question this and just consider these two facts. Young people in India, as we have seen this past month, have a great deal of energy and intelligence. And there is, on the other side, a lot of good and necessary work to be done in India. Can we offer young people real opportunities? I read a survey recently that showed that many young people want a profession where they can help others. Naturally, they want financial security. They're not stupid. It's not like they want to sacrifice their life, but they want to be. I mean, they're not all running after wealth. Many are looking for meaning. So I just feel like schools and school teachers should be exploring with children and with their parents the idea that it's a meaningful life that's worth running after. That's one leg of that complex table that we can change. Yeah. Sorry, Karthik, I went on a bit.
No, it was a delight. Actually, I would like to end our conversation with a broader question. If you could redesign assessment in Indian schools, not overnight, but as a long-term vision, what would you want our assessment system to tell us about a child that it does not tell us today? And ultimately, how do we ensure that the way we measure child does not determine the kind of learners we produce?
You want me to answer? I've already answered. What I mean, I've told you there's too much out there that the world consists of, that the world asks of a human being, right? The world asks compassion, care, responsibility. Yes, intelligence should be all of that, right? And our assessment is inexcusably narrow. It's what you can sit and do at a table in 1 hour, 1.5 hours. How, in God's name, is that even going to be comparable to what the world is asking? And mental health, that's another huge topic I didn't even touch upon. First of all, exams and narrow assessments are harming children's mental health. On top of that, they should be learning how to live well in their minds, in their bodies. I mean, a bunch of people who passed an exam, that is not what's going to change the world.
Thank you, Dr. Mukunda, for such a thought-provoking conversation. I think we are left with an important idea. Assessment is not merely a way of measuring education, it also shapes the education we provide. What we choose to measure influences what teachers teach, what students practice, and what schools ultimately value. And perhaps the real challenge is not to find a perfect text, but to build an assessment system that is fair enough to make important decisions, yet broad enough to recognize the richness of learning. Thank you once again, Dr. Mukunda. Now we would move to the question answer session. Madhu sir, would you like to take over that?
Yeah, thank you so much. Karthikeya, thank you. And we have a few questions from our participants who had logged into the YouTube. We'll take about 10 minutes. I'll request your quick responses. Before that, I would request if Subodh, who's here, Mr. Subodh Gupta, would you have anything else further to ask?
No,
Yeah. Oh,
I don't have a new question. I think questions have been already addressed.
okay.
So it is a wonderful session by Dr. Mukunda. I'm just wondering, uh, while we know the ills of this summative exams, but still we are carrying on, and it is carrying on with such a force, and especially in the government schools. I don't know what will make that change. I'm still figuring out. I mean, while we all agree, I mean, there is no dispute. I mean, at this forum or any other forum that we discuss, but still we carry on that. So that's the my serious questions. Yeah, and not I feel it so painful because I see the students are suffering.
Yes.
And especially, I work with the residential schools here in Rajgir, and they are from the lower community, like scheduled caste community, and their performance are judged by that exam. And if they are not doing well, there is a huge hangama. The department comes and hammers them by cutting off the salary of the teachers. The teachers are also furious, and they put pressure, more pressure on the students, and that's really uh, very sad to see. And that's what I'm saying. My question here is, what process will at least bring some change, or let the policymaker think, or those who are in the government, especially the education department, they consider this seriously.
Subodhji, I thought some of your team have worked in government. I mean, this question you're asking of a person who has no idea how the government works. I don't know how it works, but I wonder if one is the system has inertia. So change for on such a large scale, there is that. But both NCF and NEP are all saying the right things. They're making all the right noises, no? So is it that we don't have enough of a budget? I don't know. Education budget?
No, is it alone the formative test assessments, as you say, that's the right way? And I also feel that's the best way, because that not only uses the assessment, it also improves the learning. So
Yeah.
it goes very in parallel. It's properly embedded in the learning system. So why we are unable to continue and take that as the right direction? And so this is uh, if that is so, like even this NEP does, it does not talk about कि you stop summative exam.
That's
It does
true.
not. Why?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Good question.
So probably, Mr. Subodh, that probably is due to the scale of this thing, and the direction in which we are moving is probably from a decentralized system. We've centralized everything. We've therefore increased the scale. Probably this is a good suggestion. Maybe some public policy makers, there should be advocacy on this thing, which of course
Yeah.
some states are even arguing for decentralization. Maybe we'll get there someday, hopefully. So I'll quickly take up a few questions which our participants have posed, and I'll seek your quick responses. One is by, I couldn't get the name, the handle is KRS4570. All schools are mediocre teachers who tell, average teachers who explain, superiors ones who illustrate, and exceptional ones who inspire. We need mechanisms to help the lower rungs. Could you please comment? I think Dr. Nirja Raghavan spent
Nirja.
so much on this. A quick response, please.
So, may I, Kamla? Yeah, so I think the importance we give to teacher development is near zero. We believe that 1 year of B.Ed is enough to equip a teacher for life. So that has to change. And even this mandatory 90 days teacher training, which government school teachers are supposed to have, they just tick it off a list. It's something which has to be done. Unless a teacher is constantly in the learning mode, she or he cannot be an inspiring teacher to learners. So teacher development has to be taken more seriously by schools. It should not be just mandatory. And teachers should be asked where they want to learn. What do they want to learn? Teacher development is planned in such a way that the topic comes top down. The principal says, go to this workshop, go to that workshop. That's not the way to work. You tell teachers to have students take ownership of their learning. Please have teachers take ownership of their development.
Thank you, ma'am. Would you want to react, Doctor?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, so I and Karthikeya, we taught in a school for 2 years. And my first classroom, 6th class, where I taught English and social studies, had 78. And the next year, it got reduced by 3 to 75. The same set of students since class 7. The Right to Education Act says the ratio should be 1:35. But that is the teacher-pupil ratio, but the class size is 75, 76. There's a difference between the ratio and the class size. And I personally, during my experience, felt that the learning time of the students gets compromised seriously.
Yeah.
Of course.
So instead of this talking about the teacher-pupil ratio, we should actually talk about the class size. And
I thought that's what the policy talks of, doesn't it?
no, ma'am. The policy talks about the ratio. So what happens in UDs and all these statistical thing is that they divide the total number of students in a school by the total number of teachers, and then
that's
they
a
put
ratio.
up a ratio. But the practical thing, what happens in schools is some schools have 100 students in a classroom and some
That's
70.
still true. Is it still true?
It is, ma'am. It is. In several
I
government.
know that from my experience, when I was in school, we were 60 to a class.
Yeah.
And as a teacher, I worked in many schools. The number slowly came down to 40 and now it's 30 or 35.
But just imagine, let us assume 60. Is it possible for a teacher to
of
do
course
the
not.
job? That's
Of
the
course
question.
not. Of
Yes.
course not.
Yeah. So
Need
that
to say one thing, the presentation you said, the storytelling is the best part of it to education. See, the thing is that students are not interested in learning from the book directly.
Correct.
They do want visualize and storytelling, but the thing is in schools, the ratio which you're talking about, the ratio is unequal right now in all schools across Delhi. If you see, like, I've been to most schools in Delhi, the ratio is very little consumed to like students and number of teachers. You need that much more teachers because the students are not interested in doing from a book.
Yes.
And you need to have
true,
that interest in teaching a student. If the student is not interested, the student will walk out saying, "Ma'am ne kuch sikhaya nahi." This is what the attitude is today.
True.
So there's a question from, we'll move on to the next. This relates to what Dr. Mukunda was mentioning about competition, not training in a school. Anuradha Jagannathan has asked a question saying, competition can be an exhilarating reason to work and learn even more things. Don't you think so? Your response.
Yeah, that's true. I often get asked this question. What about healthy competition? See, the thing is that exhilaration I have seen in completely non-competitive spaces. This is not the only way to bring about exhilaration in learning and doing things. And for every competition, you have one or two or a few winners and a vast majority of losers.
Yes.
And it affects the interrelationships between them, right?
Yes.
And it also I think it distorts the learning process even for the winners because they become insecure about position and about losing that position is just like a king with worried about losing his crown. I mean, we all grew up in schools like this. So I rest my case.
Yes.
So the next question is a quick, what is your reaction to the term exam warriors?
I've not heard that term, so I wanted to ask you to explain it actually. What is that term?
Exam warriors is the book our Prime Minister has written to support children taking exams.
Oh dear. Okay.
Usually the mums that feed them Bonvita and Horlicks.
So
Please
isn't
don't
it
ask
a
us to call.
completely wrong approach to how we are looking at exams
Yeah,
and
if it's a battle,
Yeah.
where's the joy? Learning is a
Exactly.
joy. Learning should be a joy, not a fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
then
You know,
we
I
have
was listening to Dr. Nirja, and your storytelling. In fact, we are also trying in maths and some storytelling. So I completely agree. Just wanted to know whether those experiment action research was done in government school or a private school.
So there have not been any government school teachers whom I've worked with, but that Azim Premji
Oh,
school they have done. They are like a government school in the sense that they work with that class of society and they work locally with the local children. So Azim Premji school, yes, I've worked there, and largely after that with private schools. It's very
you
possible
know,
in government schools, but you know what happens? Government schools, it's again something they tick off a list. They're told you
yeah,
have to do one action research. Here are some topics. Why
that's
don't you choose from this? So whose
yeah.
action research is it? The one who wrote that topic, it is his action research. It's not the teacher's action research.
Yeah, it's hard to
Again, it's
implement
meaningless.
such innovations in the government school.
I
That's
don't
the
think it's hard. I think, see, I'm sorry if I'm overstepping, but to answer that question of what should we do to make summative exams less important, so they're so important. My only submission is when are we going to have more school teachers in the policy making bodies? Policies
okay,
are made by space research scientists, IT
right.
experts who have never gone and taught any school children. And those who
Yeah,
teach school children, who experience the pain of students, who
yeah.
experience the pain of the pressure of exams, nobody asks them what the policy should be.
Why not, Neeraja, why not add a couple of students on the committees too?
Yes, yes.
No?
Students and teachers. Students will tell you why they feel like committing suicide. You will sit up and listen. You will change your policy.
Yeah.
Who are those who make the policies? Those who've been to school years ago and who just keep tweaking whatever
Yeah,
is already existing.
I'm so sorry that I have to step
yeah.
out now.
yeah.
But this can continue. It does not have to stop. I will just step out.
We'll close this here. There have been a lot of comments by Dr. Rajan Duda, Ms. Nisha Uni, and Pratyush also. All of them, most of them are agreeing with how there's a need to decouple assessment from education, so on. I think we covered the entire uh, theme, and we could have an in-depth discussion on the whole thing. So I want to
My
thank.
apologies to Kamla. My apologies to Kamla for
No, I said,
taking my
don't
time.
worry. I said
I hope
whatever
we
I
managed
wanted
to
to
say
say.
everything. Yeah.
Don't worry.
So, ma'am, I want to thank both of you, Dr. Nirja Raghavan and Dr. Kamla Mukunda. Of
Thank
course,
you.
there were a lot of comments saying that we bought your book, both your books, and a lot of comments are there in the
Nice.
YouTube chat box. And yeah, I of course read Dr. Kamla Mukunda's book when I was doing the 2 year after retirement from
Beautiful.
this. I took up,
Beautiful.
I taught in a school. I read that book. The first volume, of course, I read threadbare. The second one, of course, I scanned through. This reflective learning is something I would like to go through also. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Thank
both
you.
of you, it's been a very inspiring discussion. And thank you, Subodh, for facilitating it. I want to thank my entire team, the Anekdhara, Mr. Sadiq, who's the backbone, Anekdhara, who does the poster, and today she's
Thank you, Anekdhara.
being a part of
Yeah,
the
thanks.
discussion here. And our next webinar, of course, will be on the last Sunday of September. We are planning to do it on student movements then and now, from JP's Sampurna Kranti to the Gen Z.
Lovely.
So
Lovely.
that is our thing. We are planning to get some speakers. We've written there. We'll put it out in our space. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good day.
you.
Bye.
Bye.